2:41 a.m., Persian Gulf, 77 nautical miles northwest of the Strait of Hormuz. 16 Iranian IRGCN rocket boats just crossed the outer radar threshold of the USS John C. Stennis carrier strike group at 52 knots, running dark, no navigation lights, no radio, engines pushing their hulls to maximum speed. 52 knots. That is 97 kilometers per hour, on open water, in the dark. At that speed, the outer escort destroyers had 4 minutes and 20 seconds before the first boats reached minimum safe standoff distance from the carrier. The strike group commander had never seen a formation that size moving that fast toward a carrier in the Gulf. Nobody had. Welcome to Navy Poverline, where we break down the operations that define the limits of what naval defense doctrine is built to handle, and what happens when an adversary deliberately exceeds those limits. There is a specific category of threat in naval warfare that planners call a mass raid. It is the deliberate commitment of a large number of individual platforms against a single high-value target in the expectation that the sheer volume of the attack will overwhelm the defender's ability to engage all threats simultaneously. The logic is mathematically brutal. Every close-in defense system, every gun mount, every missile launcher has a finite reload time and a finite magazine. If you send more attackers than the defender can engage in the time available, some of them reach the target. Against a carrier, some of them reaching the target is enough. The IRGCN had developed its rocket boat doctrine around this logic for over a decade. The rocket boats in question were a combination of Ashura-class and modified Bavar fiberglass attack craft, small, fast, cheap, and expendable. The Ashura carries two 107mm unguided rocket pods and a DSK 12.7mm heavy machine gun. Its hull is fiberglass, which provides virtually no radar cross-section reduction, but makes the boat extremely fast because it is light. At full power in calm Gulf water, an Ashura can make between 45 and 55 knots. It has a crew of 3. It costs a fraction of a single defensive missile. 16 of them, closing at 52 knots, represented a mass raid problem at a scale the Gulf had not seen. The intelligence picture ahead of that night had been developing, but had not produced an actionable warning. Satellite imagery 48 hours before the incident had shown elevated activity at an IRGCN coastal base on the Iranian Gulf shore, specifically a larger-than-normal concentration of small craft in the harbor area. The assessment had noted the activity, but had categorized it as pre-exercise staging, consistent with annual IRGCN training patterns. The previous year's exercises in the same calendar period had involved similar staging activity followed by multi-day maneuver operations that had not threatened U.S. assets directly. The pattern recognition was correct as a historical assessment. It was wrong as a predictive one. The 16 boats had departed the coastal base at 02:08 in 2 columns of 8. Their initial heading was northeast, directly away from the carrier strike group, in a course that appeared on radar to be an outbound patrol. At 02:29, both columns executed a coordinated 180-degree turn and accelerated to maximum speed, heading southwest toward the carrier's position. The turn was detected at 02:31 by the P-8 Poseidon on Station 40, nautical miles north of the formation. The P-8 crew reported 16 small contacts executing a coordinated turn and accelerating on a direct course toward the strike group. The report reached the strike group's surface warfare coordinator at 02:33, 8 minutes from turn detection to the outer edge of the strike group's radar coverage. The surface warfare coordinator had the contacts on radar at 02:35. 16 tracks in 2 columns of 8 at 51 knots, bearing 047, range 28 nautical miles. Course and speed direct toward the carrier. Time to minimum standoff, 11 minutes. The coordinator elevated the contacts to imminent hostile at 02:35 and 40 seconds. Not possible, not probable, not elevated. Imminent. The speed alone justified the classification. No commercial vessel moves at 51 knots. No fishing boat runs dark in 2 organized columns at 02:35 in the morning toward a carrier strike group. The strike group commander received the report at 02:36. He had 5 choices and about 45 seconds to make a priority decision among them before the situation evolved past the point where any choice was clean. The first choice was immediate air engagement. Launch FA-18S from the carrier, engage the boat formation at maximum range before it reached the escort screen. The carrier's alert fighters could be airborne in 4 minutes. The boats would be at 20 nautical miles when the first aircraft cleared the deck. A single FA-18F with Maverick air-to-surface missiles could engage multiple small boat targets per pass. 16 boats against 2 fighters with full strike loads was not a favorable arithmetic for the boats. The risk: 4 minutes to first aircraft airborne meant the boats were already significantly closer. A strafing engagement against a fast-moving surface formation at night required targeting geometry that was achievable, but not guaranteed to be clean before the formation reached close range. The second choice was surface engagement. Put the escort destroyers USS Chung-hoon and USS Shoup in the path of the boat formation and use their Mark 38 guns, .50 caliber mounts, and phalanx systems to engage as the boats closed. 2 destroyers against 16 small boats in a close-range engagement. The risk: close range with 16 simultaneously closing targets, spread across a wide-bearing arc, was exactly the mass raid scenario the doctrine most worried about. Even with all systems fully operational and all mounts engaged, the geometry of 16 boats closing from multiple bearings created engagement sequencing problems that could allow some boats to reach the destroyer screen, and, if they got through, the carrier behind it. The third choice was a combination: simultaneous air and surface engagement from maximum range, accepting that the coordination overhead of launching aircraft while the surface screen engaged would complicate both efforts but create multiple independent threat layers that the boats had to defeat simultaneously. The fourth choice was to maneuver the carrier. A carrier cannot outrun an Ashura at 52 knots. But a course change could change the geometry, potentially putting the boat formation in a less favorable attack angle, increasing the time the escort screen had to work the problem, or using the carrier's own wake turbulence to disrupt the formation's approach. The fifth choice, and the one that was available because of the specific geography of that night, was the carrier's own organic close-in defense. The Reagan-class carriers carry Phalanx CIWS systems, ram launchers, rolling airframe missiles designed specifically for close-in defense against fast surface threats and anti-ship missiles, and NATO Sea Sparrow missile systems. If the boat formation got through the escort screen, the carrier was not defenseless. But using the carrier's own defensive systems against an inbound threat meant the threat was already very close. To strike, he ordered both alert FA-18Fs airborne immediately, directed Chung-hoon and Shoup to close on the bearing of the boat formation at maximum speed, ordered the carrier to come to a new heading that opened the angle, and authorized all surface warfare systems to engage any contact crossing inside 2,000 meters without further authority. The authorization was specific and deliberate. Any contact crossing inside 2,000 meters, not after warning, not after challenge. Any contact. The speed and scale of the threat had removed the escalation of force sequence from the tactical picture. 16 boats at 52 knots with 11 minutes to minimum standoff were not a situation that allowed for Channel 16 challenges and graduated responses. The decision to authorize immediate defensive fire inside 2,000 meters was the commander applying his ROE authority to a threat that had already satisfied every legal and tactical criterion for hostile classification. The F/A-18Fs cleared the catapults at 0240 and 12 seconds. The first airstrike engagement happened at 0243 and 30 seconds. The lead FA-18F, now at 14,000 feet above the formation, fired a single AGM-65 Maverick at the lead contact in the rightmost column. The Maverick's imaging infrared seeker locked on the heat signature of the lead boat's outboard engines. Impact at 0243 and 47 seconds. The explosion was large enough to be visible to every radar operator in the strike group. The pilot rolled right and set up for a second pass. The second F/A-18F engaged the lead contact in the leftmost column with a burst of 20mm cannon fire from the M61 Vulcan on its first strafing run. The burst walked across the boat's stern. The boat decelerated sharply. It was still afloat but no longer at speed. 14 boats still approaching. Speed slightly reduced. The formation had dropped to approximately 44 knots following the first 2 engagements. Either the remaining crews had seen what happened to the lead boats and pulled back power involuntarily, or the command had issued a speed reduction for tactical reasons. It did not matter. 14 boats at 44 knots were at 13 nautical miles. Time to the destroyer screen, under 9 minutes. Chung-hoon and Shoup were at 8 and 11 nautical miles from the boat formation respectively. closing at 30 knots from the south. The geometry was not going to put the destroyers between the boats and the carrier before the boats reached the carrier's position, unless the airstrikes degraded the formation further and faster. The two FA-18Fs made their second passes simultaneously from converging angles. The second Maverick fired by the lead aircraft impacted a second contact. Right column, third boat. Another fireball. The strafing run by the second aircraft across the center column's lead boat struck the hull and detonated the rocket propellant in the port side pod. The secondary explosion removed the boat from the tactical picture. 3 boats destroyed, 13 continuing. At 0247, 2 more FA-18Fs were airborne from the carrier, a second section from the ready alert. The carrier's deck crew had launched 2 additional aircraft in the 7 minutes since the initial pair had cleared. 4 FA-18S against 13 remaining boats. The engagement that followed over the next 14 minutes was documented in the Strike Group Commander's after-action report in detail that would fill a separate volume. The summary version is this. The 4 aircraft made a combined 11 attack passes over the boat formation, expending Mavericks and conducting strafing runs in a coordinated sequence that progressively degraded the formation's size and speed. Chung Hoon's Mark 38 engaged 2 boats that had broken east and were attempting to flank around the destroyer. The Mark 38 destroyed both at ranges between 1,800 and 2,200 meters. Shoop's 5-inch gun engaged 3 contacts that had pushed south of the main formation on a different approach vector. An attempt to use the spread of the primary engagement to create a secondary threat axis with reduced defensive coverage. The 5-inch gun's first round missed. The second and third rounds both struck within lethal radius. 2 of the 3 contacts were destroyed. 1 was damaged and drifting. At 2:57 a.m., 16 minutes after the P-8 had first detected the turn, the last moving contact in the original formation was engaged by a Maverick from the 3rd aircraft. The warhead detonated against the boat's hull at 2:57 and 32 seconds. The tactical picture showed no further contacts closing on the carrier. Final assessment: 13 of 16 boats destroyed or mission killed. 2 damaged and dead in the water. 1 had turned north at approximately the halfway point of the engagement and was tracked back toward the Iranian coast. Its crew had either lost nerve or received an abort order. The carrier had not been touched. No rounds from the boat formation had reached any U.S. warship. The engagement had been conducted entirely by air assets, and the 2 escort destroyers at ranges outside the boat's own weapons envelopes. U.S. casualties, 0. Iranian personnel killed, an estimated 31, based on the assessed crew size of the destroyed vessels. An unknown number wounded on the 2 boats that remained afloat. The Strike Group Commander's after-action report ran to 47 pages. 3 findings stood out across the reviews that followed. The first was the margin. 13 boats destroyed before reaching the carrier was the tactical outcome. The margin by which that outcome was achieved depended critically on the 8-minute window between the P-8 detecting the turn and the contacts reaching radar range of the formation. Those 8 minutes, which produced the authorization, the aircraft launch, the destroyer positioning, the carrier maneuver, were the difference between a managed engagement and a close-range crisis. The review noted explicitly that a coordinated approach that did not begin with a turn at 28 nautical miles, that began instead from a position where the boats were already at 15 nautical miles when first detected, would have compressed those 8 minutes to under 3. 3 minutes is not enough time to launch, coordinate, and engage 16 targets before they reach the destroyer screen. The detection platform, the P-8 Poseidon running its patrol 40 nautical miles north, was the asset that created the 8-minute window. The review recommended establishing a continuous minimum 50 nautical mile radar picket around carrier strike groups in the Gulf using both P-8 sorties and persistent endurance UAVs. The recommendation was approved. The second finding addressed the split formation tactic. When the 16 boats divided into 4 columns and spread their approach across a wider arc, the targeting complexity for the air assets increased significantly. Coordinating 4 aircraft against 13 simultaneously moving targets across a 12 nautical mile front required real-time airborne coordination that produced 2 near conflicts between attacking aircraft on adjacent passes. The review recommended a formal mass raid engagement coordination protocol, a structured sequence for air-to-surface strike coordination against large small boat formations that was subsequently incorporated into carrier air wing doctrine. The third finding was the strategic one. 16 boats had been committed to a direct attack on a carrier strike group. The operation required planning, rehearsal, logistics coordination, and, at the command level, a decision that 16 crews were expendable in pursuit of whatever objective the operation was designed to achieve. The intelligence community's assessment of the objective, delivered 5 days after the incident, was that the operation had been designed not to sink the carrier, but to force the carrier to defend itself at close range, to create the conditions for 1 or 2 boats to reach close enough to detonate against the hull, producing casualties and damage that would be presented as proof that the U.S. Navy was vulnerable in the Gulf. The strategic objective was the story, not the sinking. In that sense, 13 boats destroyed and a carrier undamaged was a tactical victory and a strategic draw. The story of 16 boats charging a carrier at 52 knots in the dark was a story Iran could tell regardless of how many boats it lost. 31 Iranian personnel killed in a night engagement in the Persian Gulf is a significant human cost. It is also, in the IRGCN's doctrine, an acceptable cost for the strategic return of demonstrating that it could assemble and commit a mass rocket boat raid against an American carrier. The carrier is still deployed. The IRGCN is still in the Gulf, and in the classified annexes of the strike group commander's after-action report, the paragraph that addresses the scenario in which the P-8 had not been on station, the paragraph that models the engagement geometry with a 3-minute warning instead of 8, produces an outcome that is not classified because of its sensitivity to U.S. capabilities. It is classified because of what it says about what 13 boats at 52 knots in the dark can do when the defense runs out of time. Stay vigilant, stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.